I worked with a guy that he was famous for putting harnesses in cars, but he didn't put harnesses in cars the way the OE would want them. None of the harnesses he put in ever fixed the car. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting, thought-provoking episode of the Jaded Mechanic podcast. My name's Jeff, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey of reflection and insight into the toils and triumphs of a career in automotive repair. After more than 20 years of skin, knuckles, and tool debt, I want to share my perspectives and hear other people's thoughts about our industry. So pour yourself a strong coffee or grab a cold Canadian beer and get ready for some great conversation. It's been an interesting week, not for doing anything particularly like, oh my God, mentally stimulating. It's a 2015 Transit 3500 that my boss uses as in our bus fleet, right? So we have a bus fleet that runs everything from large Prevost motor coaches, taking like 60 people anywhere across the country, right? Up to Toronto from my place for a ball game, stuff like that. All over, we go all over North America with them. So imagine like a tour bus the size of what you'd see a Rockstar in, that kind of thing, all the way down to Transit 3500s that we can put, 15 people in, and we shuttle people around in that. So we have a quite an extensive fleet. So this 2015 last week needed a catalytic converters put in it because it's got misfires. It's got the cat is dead on one bank. 2015, it's only, you'd think, it's not even 8 years old. It is rusted bad. I have a section of the floor step well on the passenger side after repair, and then in order to pull the cats in that, the subframe has to come out. And what you saw, the pictures that I sent you, was the bolts that go up through the subframe into the body in a captured nut breaking off. So me then doing the old, try to weld to that to get them out. It was not fun. And I mean, I'm pretty good at it, but it's one thing to weld like a little M10 bolt in an exhaust manifold cylinder head, right? It's another to weld an M16 size bolt in the body when it's broke way up. So I'm having to kind of like string the MIG wire to kind of start to drip and then let it cool so that I can start to build up and down to get a nut on there to essentially rebuild the head of the bolt. It was, I want to say how long it took me, but there's a reason I'm not flat rate working on this stuff is because we got them all out, but it was a day just to get the bolts out, right? So the job is probably under a 12-hour job for sure to do the cats. And I've got way more than 12 hours into it with it when you add into the bolt times and everything else. So, which is, my boss is great. He is totally cool he just wants it fixed properly. Like, it doesn't matter what it takes me to do. He is saving money by having us do it versus how long it would have to sit at the Ford dealer before they can even get to it. And then I could show you work orders that have gone sideways of stuff that's gone over there to the Ford dealer. So, I mean, he is just happy to keep as much in-house as he can. So, and he's great. I can take him under there, show him what I have to do. He is so cool. He's awesome. This is by far the best boss I've ever had, by far. In terms of, he's not all wrapped up into how many hours is this supposed to take and what did it, he doesn't care. He is just like, I have a fleet. I need a mechanic. You're my mechanic. Fix my fleet. That's all I need to hear, boss. Thanks, man.
Right.
It's funny, right? Like everybody, I'm known as the Jaded Mechanic, but I mean, I only hope that everybody finds in their career what I've found, right? And nothing ever stays the same or stays forever. Nothing is permanent. No, kind of tell us and tell the listeners, give us where you work, give us some of your background, your history, why you're in it, what you love about it, that kind of stuff. That's what they want to know.
Yeah, man. And I want to say before I, start rattling off all this stuff, I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
I love, kind of meeting you guys. Like I said, when I first met you was at ASTE So it's definitely been an adventure. So I really appreciate it. I like the idea of the podcast. So
it was a life-changing event, AST.
Yeah.
For so many of us, right? Like,
dude, you're telling me.
Yeah.
So I started off as a VW tech. I worked at actually even before that. I started off as a service writer. I did service writing for 2 years or so. I was a Volkswagen tech. I decided that I wanted to branch out and just go wild with it. So I worked at a Volkswagen Audi performance shop. Now I'm a lowly, hated dealer tech at the local Audi dealer, just ticking all the independent guys off.
Hey, no, you don't tick me off. I don't want to work on them, so doesn't bother me.
There's
at
some
all.
good ones out there. There. Same goes on both sides. But man, I mentor a lot of the technicians in the shop. I also, from time to time, will mentor high school or students coming out of any sort of school, whether it be our community colleges. I've also talked to UTI students just about the pathway. It's kind of one of my passions. I mean, I love working on cars. I love what I do. I've had plenty of bad days, but I enjoy kind of teaching and showing others. That's kind of my gig.
So how many years, Noah, have you been in the industry?
I'm fairly new compared to all you guys. I've only been in it 5 years as a tech. I think that 2 years as an advisor, that doesn't really count. But yeah, so I've been doing automotive for 7 years now. So, and it's just been an adventure.
Did you attend a school like UTI, or did you kind of know?
No.
Right?
So I have a buddy of mine. He was a writer, and he was like, I was working retail. Retails, guys say, being a tech is a hard job. Being retail is like so thankless. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you want to be a car guy, blah, blah, blah. He's like, hey man, come to your local dealer. You'll just click some buttons on the computer. You get cash. Everything's great. I found out that's not that's not the case. It doesn't go like that. Actually, people yell. Everybody yells.
Yes.
So, writing was a double-edged sword because I'm a people person. I actually enjoy people, but the service side, at least at a dealer, is, I expect the XYZ. And if I don't get it, I'm going to be frustrated. So I was just getting, just like time after time again, bad experience. Techs were mad, parts was mad, going home. Like, so, and I'd always worked on cars. I had project cars at the house. I was always going to car meets. I was like, why don't I go wrench? And I'm seeing these guys, I'm crunching their hours for the week. They're crushing hours. I'm like, dude, that's where it's at. You get to use power tools. I mean, what could go wrong? I mean, everything could, but, I started out in the shop, they put me as a lube tech. That got old really quick.
Yeah,
dude, I feel for these lube techs too. Look, we there's plenty of lazy lube techs and say what you want, but dude, it is the same thing every day. And that's how I know I'm not fit for like working at a factory or something like that, as I can't do the exact same oil change, tire rotate 24/7. Nah, not for me.
Yeah. The variety gets to be where sometimes it's the only plus of the day, right? Is that you did something new, that it was the first time you did it. And it may kick your butt financially on your paycheck the first time you do something, but by God, you got to do it, right? You got that experience. I mean, that's something that it carries it can get addictive, for sure.
Well, besides, so cars and working on cars is what my main passion was. But the other part was, I was like, so, the way I understood flat rate, and this is when I say flat rate, bad word, I know.
No.
But
No.
But the way I understood it is, I was like, so you're telling me as the advisor, I have all these inputs and I get an output. And if one of these inputs, like the parts guy's sick, my paycheck was kind of toast, and that's most advisors. It depends, right? But as a technician, the way I understood it at that naive time was I could define what my pay would be, right? I didn't have as much of a cap. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll put my head down and I'll work hard. And, they don't put you on the, the line right out the gate, and every, young kid you put in the loop base wants to be a master tech day one. Mm-hmm. And, I came in there, I was like, I'm a car guy. I put turbos on. I know I know all this stuff. I know. I was that
Yeah.
guy.
I'm
And it
gonna
was
be.
about a weekend. I was like, I don't know anything.
It's
I don't
different,
know
isn't it?
any of the stuff I knew
Yeah.
or I thought I knew.
Yeah. The enthusiast.
So,
When we branch out from being the enthusiast to being the professional, right? It goes because what we can live with in our own car, or what we can live with in our project car, that doesn't serve Mrs. Smith's brand new trying to find her squeak and rattle. She doesn't care, about the performance under the hood of that thing, or all this different functions that it has. She wants that stupid noise gone, right? And us that drive performance stuff, or like me, that I drove Jeeps. I've driven Jeeps for 20 some years now, right? And it's like, oh, squeak and rattle? you know, does it have
oh
death
yeah, for
wobble?
sure.
Yeah, no. Well, then call me when it has death wobble, right? Like it's, so it's always, I try to keep that in my perspective, is that it looks easy on the outside to everybody that it's just like has watched a TV show or something. Like, oh, I can do that. That's not the glory days are not, it's, I make the analogy all the time to the Fast and Furious that glorified this industry. I mean, so many young people got into it. Like I can remember, so I was already enrolled so the very first movie when it came out, so that tells you going how far back, right? 1998 or something is when the first Fast and Furious. I can remember being in college and remember sitting around with these kids, and I was a little bit older than them, and they're talking about this movie, and they were already into, a couple of them had Scirocco's and stuff like that, and the tuner scene when I'd gone to school in Ottawa was a lot bigger than where I had grown up. So I mean, I was like, and they're talking about this movie that's coming out, and I'm like, huh, what? At the time I was driving a 1980 GMC half ton with a warmed over small block in it, right? I looked like a hillbilly. I acted like a hillbilly. And there's these kids with all these, front wheel drive, Hondas, and they're really cool kids had a Volkswagen and, there was an RX-7 and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is so foreign to me. And that movie totally sold this industry to a whole other generation, right? Which is a good thing.
Oh, and we're gonna loop into that later.
Yeah.
We're gonna loop into that later. And being an enthusiast, that whole idea, right, and that concept, I stored that in my head. I was like, that is not what this is.
Yeah.
Right. Because then I started to see guys, they were able to explain things with competence. They knew when something was not repairable, when it was repairable, and what to do in the various situations. It's like, oh, that's a professional. That's so, So yeah, and that's we'll talk about the interest here in a second, but that's kind of where I understood that there was calibers. That was when I first realized there's calibers to this stuff. I was like, okay, cool. So I started paying attention to who the guys in the shop were that were on their stuff. And I had the advantage of being the advisor, so I at least knew what guys did. I knew what guys did the best work, and I was able to kind of focus in on them.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything because I don't have the fancy degree, right? There's UTI students coming in, they're checking everything out. UTI is, if you don't know, is Universal Technical Institute. It's also called NTI. It is the prestigious college in our area, so it's hard to compete, right? I have nothing that says I know anything,
right? So
I'm trying to do everything I can. Ended up getting on the line thanks to my mentor. I ended up finding a really good mentor, and I've said I have been very fortunate in the mentors that I've had. We take for granted some of the mentors that we've had throughout the jobs we've had, and I consider myself lucky. So
it's a very it's a quote, not a quotient. It's a part of our industry that's lacking. I feel like it needs work. The mentorship role. I think it needs a much more defined situation of how to do it and who should do it and the weight that it carries. Right. It's too many times that we've seen. Well, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with working next to somebody and helping them out and learning. But I mean, too many times it's just been a financial move to do that in this industry, right? And just to put that in, you would do the hard stuff or the physical stuff and your production hours are going into his time ticket, right? I'm not necessarily here to say that that's a bad thing, but it can be abused. So continue on with what you were making a good point there.
Oh, I wasn't crushing hours. I was probably doing and screwing up everything that I could on a consistent basis. I was trouble road on that. Oh, I mean, like not like bad. I was just just doing all the little silly stuff. And I can remember like 3 months in, he's like, one of the first things my mentor showed me is he was like, hey, if we're going to work on this type of car, you need to know how to read a wiring diagram. And I'm really thankful for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really thankful for that. Right out the gate, we started with wiring. We didn't go to ball joints or anything like that. We started with wiring. And I'm like, why? I don't care. Oh, power and ground, dude. I get whatever. I've seen it. And it ended up being key. It ended up being super key,
Yeah.
And he was super patient with me. And I remember a time where he's like, did you check the fuse? I knew where the fuse was.
Mm-hmm.
I just glanced at it. And I said, no, it was 4 hours, 5 hours go by. I am literally just counting, the ceiling at this point. Oh, I can't find this. All right, did you check the fuse? No, I checked the fuse. Walks over there, he pulls the fuse out. It was the fuse.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. And I've kind of stored that in my head, right? Of just kind of humbling.
I call those light bulb moments.
They
right?
are.
Like it's when it goes off in your head and it's boom. Eyes get woke up. Like
we all have them,
Mm-hmm.
you get one win and then there's something silly comes by and you're like, so yeah. And I mean, that worked out good for a while. I was starting out during COVID, or
Mm-hmm.
I was going into my first full year as a tech during COVID. COVID hit, we shut down. We ended up like the big dealer groups, they ended up going on guarantee. We dropped all work. When I say we dropped all work, it wasn't that we dropped some work or half. We stopped having cars for like 4 weeks. Wow. Now I talked to the local guys at the independents and they're like, no, we were rolling. Mm-hmm. We were rolling solid. Mm-hmm. We didn't skip a beat. So, like the recall stopped. Nobody was coming. Nobody. So, we came off and was getting decent guarantee and work was just not steady yet. And it was frustrating. You're still learning. I mean, I had some sort of basis, but you're not 100% efficient, right? Yeah. I'm still chasing fuses. I'm still trying to figure out where the water leaks come from, Mm-hmm. And that was another thing too, is, I hear guys and I'm not trying to say anything, but I hear guys say that they started out and then they do brakes. And then when you start out, at least at the shops that I've started out on, once you go from lube tech, you go straight into diagnosis. Now, the definition of diagnosis is different for depending on who you are, right? There's no picoscope. Mm-hmm. However, you're doing check engine light dag, you're doing water rattle, right? Like you said, rattles, things like that. And it's frustrating, because I'm new. I'm spending 2 hours on a rattle, right? Yeah. And we all know that's not efficient. So, I was getting frustrated because the customer pay, the good work, it just wasn't hitting. It could have been me. It could have been me. It could have been anything. I saw a local performance shop. I took an independent performance shop. They did Volkswagen and Audi. And I was like, dude, I'm an enthusiast. I want to chase. You were talking about Fast and Furious. I wanted the nitrous and the hot spoilers. Oh, let's do it all. The flames. I'm all for it.
So at the dealer, were you kind of right after you came out of the lube tech role? Did they start to? Did you go to flat rate right away?
No. I was on guarantee for a few months. I was on guarantee for probably at least 6 months. Right. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't feel like, at least at this dealer group, they do people wrong. It's more of just, I guess I'm a slow learner in that process. I was really just struggling with, because I was getting hit left and right with just like CAN bus. What is a CAN bus? Really brake jobs, at least at this manufacturer. I talked to a Toyota tech, and he's I think he was a C tech, and he's like, yeah, man, I'm turning 80 hours. And I was like, dude, I didn't know a whole lot of techs in that shop that were turning 80. But like I said, I wasn't efficient enough for it. Right. Mm-hmm. I want to take the step on that, and the initiative it wasn't working. So yeah, man, I went to the independent, and I realized real quick, for any dealer guys out there that are like, I'm going to take the leap to independent, it's going to be, I'm going to do nothing but, Chevy timing chains and, oh man, it's going to be, that's not the case. I realized really quick how the experience I had on the new cars didn't pan to independent. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that I knew failed did not, like, I was working on the same. I got lucky because I was literally transitioning to the same brand.
Yeah, so you're kind of familiar with how to read the wiring diagram, right?
I know how
because
to change
that's,
oil on this thing.
yeah,
I can
right.
rotate the tires so good on this thing.
The service information is kind of, you're familiar. The scan data, how it looks, is you're kind of familiar, right?
Well, kind of, sort of, because I'm like, what is this thing called Mitchell?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean you don't have the factory scan tool? What's I'm learning all this stuff. I'm like, well, you just call Techline when it's not good.
Yep.
Right. That's your diag, right? No, that's not what it is. Well,
Yeah.
and I want to take a step back and say the master techs in that Volkswagen dealer, they were good and they knew their stuff, but I was still somewhat new.
Mm-hmm.
So not only I'm encountering modified, tuned European cars. And my job mainly was filtering through what was coming in, and I'm doing kind of either a basic diagnosis, and then if it's an advanced diagnosis, I'm letting everybody know, kind of getting that set up, and then starting the advanced, hey, this is more than just a misfire. This has got a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of like I guess I would call I was called the diagnostic tech, but I was really just kind of filtering through stuff. And I got to see, I have zero regrets. I got to see some of the most awesome stuff. Like I thought I saw awesome stuff, but you go to an independent and you're like, no, the camshaft actuator, it can't explode. That's not a thing. And then you go to an independent, you're like, what do you mean you have 5 of them?
Yep.
You just, what do you mean? I saw so many crazy failures, and then I saw even cooler failures because I was working on enthusiast cars.
Yes.
And I've got a story about that for later. But, so I'm learning, like you were talking about Jeeps, I'm learning, I'm like, what do you mean you can rail in the bolt and then drive it here with no bolt in there? Is that possible? I think I drove a car one time. They're like, it was like customer states, noise from front end, drive it. And like immediately the suspension, the steering wheel was like violently shaking. Like the lug nuts were like barely on, lug bolts, things like that. So I got a lot more hands-on, and I realized really quick that I had to be a whole lot smarter than I was. And that's when I started looking at, I started looking at, Scanner Danner. I started going through, I'm like, who are the people in this industry that have the knowledge that I don't have? And, I'm like, okay, there's these expos. Like, dude, I was a dealer tech. Like you go to manufacturer trains you. You are now good.
Yep.
There's all sorts of knowledge out there.
Don't think outside the box.
Oh, dude, no, never again. I know you've had to think outside the box, and you, like you were talking, before we started recording, you were talking about welding that bolt.
Yeah.
And, you probably are like, well, that's no big deal to me, but you got to understand that's a skill that if you're not familiar with this stuff, you don't know. And I mean, that's a more simple version of it, but there's a lot more to that process when you're experiencing higher mileage, older cars, or rust.
Like you said, modified stuff is modified. Modified can be anything from like working around a lift kit on a vehicle, right? How it's changed alignment angles, to how it's changed driveline angles, to modified can be, well, the wiring is rubbing now on this because when he put his cold air intake on, right, he unplugged the harness from this little catch and now it's rubbing on something it shouldn't. When you walk out into modified vehicles, you have to think outside the box. You have to be able to get past that. It's always going to be the red car, blue car syndrome, right? It's always going to be the same failure, because it's not. When you put the enthusiast, sprinkle a little bit of that into the recipe, there's all kinds of opportunity for shenanigans to go out the window, right? Like it adds a whole other variable to how it can break. I mean, I like it, but it takes a different mindset. You just have to pull yourself back from it and go, the time is not, I can't focus on that. I have to think about how this thing works and how they've made it work different and fix it.
Well, and at the dealership, I would encounter, just as a tech in general, I shouldn't say the dealer, but I would encounter something and I'd be like, I don't really know what over advanced means. Let me figure that out. And I would start to learn, and then you get little trainings here and there, but most guys, listen, I do this every day. Most guys, they'll rail through the training and then be like, yep, did it, blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, okay, cool. So that means, this is timing. Okay, what is variable valve timing? And, start to go through the loop. And, so, you're especially as a dealer tech, tuned is bad. Tuned is bad. If it's changed, it's not usable. Everything must be stock. And what I realized is on 90% of the stuff, it's really not that much different.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, fuel trims might be different. Certain things might not be there.
Yeah.
But it is for they don't change. I'm saying this lightly, but they don't change as much as some people think, right? If you're getting a misfire, likely you're getting a misfire because something in the car or the engine is not functioning properly. Mm-hmm. Right. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't have all these resources anymore. How do I figure that out? Oh, well, you can use an oscilloscope. You can use a gauge from your local parts store. You can use all this different stuff. Figure it out. And mm-hmm. that's what I was thankful for, because for the most part, I was left alone. They're like, hey, we need this figured out. Just let's get this going. Let's get an idea of what's going on. And then mm-hmm. I started seeing, because I'm seeing, instead of oil change, tire rotate, customer states rattle, customer states water leak coming through, I'm seeing like check engine light, doesn't start. What? Just so I started to really kind of understand what it meant to be a technician in the more like down and dirty kind of just sense.
Yeah, problem solving versus parts changing, right?
Let's just say thinking on your feet, mm-hmm. right? Thinking on your feet, because that was just not a skill that I had.
Yep.
Well, I don't know what brand intake that is. I don't know. And I remember the shop foreman at the time was like, okay, you have a phone? I was like, yeah. He's like, you got Google? Like, yeah. 2 minutes later, I had the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. This isn't so difficult, but it's still more research, right? It doesn't matter if we're working on a 100 horsepower Jetta. You still have to kind of, do research. And if we're working on a factory Jetta, you still have to do research on your scan tool, whatever, to fully understand that stuff. So, and again, I had a phenomenal mentor, Josh, the guy, the foreman of that shop. He does an amazing job. He is more of a fabricator. And I didn't really understand what that was. I was like, he's like, yeah, I do engines and fabrication. And I'm like, okay, what's that? Okay, you put pistons in there. And no, there's a lot to that. And just he really enjoyed the little nuts and bolts to mm-hmm. the stuff, and in like really inept detail. Whereas I was like, okay, bolt goes out, bolt goes in, no big deal. He's like, what kind of bolt? What's the grade of the bolt? Like, yeah. I mean, it's a bolt. Who cares? And I started really, kind of understanding that. So again, another phenomenal mentor that I was able to really learn a lot from and gain a lot more respect for what, independents have to see mm-hmm. on a day-to-day basis.
It's different for sure, right? Totally different mindset, totally different. I equate it a lot to when it's warranty, right? You've got a budget that is much different than the customer's budget when it's, and even from, I'm just going to step away from the performance thing a little bit. When a customer's got a diagnostic dilemma, when it's under warranty, yes, there's things you can do, but I mean,
that's what you got to do.
Yeah, but the budget is not the same, right? It's they make it up somehow. They make claims, it gets paid, the car gets fixed. When the customer, they cannot have you spending 20 hours trying to dig through a car to find a rubbed wire for an intermittent short, and that kind of thing. Like, it's a situation of you got to be able to break that circuit down real fast, get to the problem, or figure out, to get from point A to point B, the roadmap initially went this way. If I run a wire, an overlay through the harness, right, tape it up, do the whole thing, am I going to fix the car? Yes. Am I going to do it within a much better time restraint and budget for the customer? Certainly. So, I mean, that's the whole thing.
What I was really facing is, let's say it was more on the electrical side, right? So I get this fault. I'm working on this Audi, which I didn't know a whole lot about at the time. And, I'm getting a fault on the control module. Who do you call? Mm-hmm. Who do you call when you have a fault on the control module? Well, you don't have a tech line anymore. You don't have, all this whatever, that you used to have. You don't have, 20 guys in the same building that only work on just that car.
Yep.
Well, now you have to figure it out. Oh, I'm not going to figure it out. Cool. Okay, cool. We'll quote the control module. Now, this control module, you have to program, and we're starting to talk about $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Cool. Okay, cool. You want to be, you want to guess at it? Cool. You guess at it, you put it in, you plug it in, same fault.
Mm.
Now what do you do? And, everybody in the room knows that you didn't diagnose it right.
Yeah.
And you don't have any proof. You have no proof. You have no, well, there's a fault there.
Yep.
Okay. That doesn't hold water to a customer that just paid $4,000.
You told them. Yeah.
And so, that's where I was starting. I was like, okay, scopes come into play, because I had already had a good, I felt like I had a kind of a swift upbringing into the least basic electrical, doing your voltage drops, things like that. I mean, it's just always something stupid. We had so much coolant migration, but you get used to pattern failures too.
Yep.
And you can't get too used to pattern failures. Not everything's a pattern failure. There is a no one to hold them, no one to fold them sort of rule, but you need to be able to prove that. Hey, boss man, listen, we just put this $2,900 computer in this car. However, I have this scope graph that shows that it was dropping out over this time. I have something to show you and the customer versus, well, I mean, I went on Identifix and it doesn't hold water, man.
No, I learned really quick that the way I approach things is I try to go, and I don't necessarily start my diag at the component, for example, but I want to try and prove or disprove the component as fast as possible. Because you've heard me say the analogy a lot. If I can save that customer and go, well, it's not $1,000 fuel pump, it's a circuit issue, I can sell a whole lot of diagnostic time to find why that fuel pump is not turning on before we ever even get close to $1,000 fuel pump job. Because, I mean, you got to remember, $1,000 fuel pump job, when you're working on like a truck and it's a rotten tank and a rotten sender, right? And you're now going to be escalated into $1,000 job. If I can go out and go, okay, that relay is not powering the pump, right? I went to the pump. I can turn the pump on with some other method. I can make the truck run. So now we just have to figure out why that electrically is not functioning. It's so much easier to go with that customer and give them that peace of mind that says, because what they had in their mind was they're ready and braced for $1,000 at least. You can go out and go, listen, it's not that. It's something broke. There's a break in the harness somewhere. I can find it. Then they feel better because they immediately go, okay, even if it's 6 hours to find this break in the harness and fix it, door rate's $120, say, they're less than $1,000. You know what I mean? So that was how I approached it from two facets. When I was at the dealer under warranty, because you only had, a very short and limited period of time to get to it. And even when I was doing diag, then the customer was paying for it. It was still, we didn't have a ton of time sold right off the hop. So it became a situation of try to get to the component to prove that it's either failed or good, so that if I do have to open up a harness, I have convinced the customer the expensive part is okay, and now we just have to fix the harness. And I'd laugh when I'd see guys. I worked with a guy that he was famous for putting harnesses in cars, but he didn't put harnesses in cars the way the OE would want them. Some of the time he would take the harness. Well, let's just say we had a box of connectors that were all brand new.
Because he wasn't a cut the carpet type of guy.
Yeah, he was cut the harness. Carpet. Yeah, cut the harness back, leave that plug in, which you and I know most of the time the plug is where the issue is going to be, right? It's going to be the wire, how it's crimped onto the terminal or something like that. So none of the harnesses he put in ever fixed the car. Right. And it was frustrating. I mean, it was great because we had, if you needed a connector or a pin or something, we had a box so you could get it. I would see these, it would take sometimes 2 months, 3 months for a harness to be made and come in. And then he would put it in the car for some intermittent, won't start 1 out of 7 days, got a long crank or something like that, or warning light come on. And I just was shaking my head going, I will never be that type of mechanic ever. Because once that is out of, like when we're in the aftermarket side of it, the independents, we never tell a customer, oh, it's going to need a harness, at least in my experience. And then, okay, we got to go find your harness. We're going to have to fix what's there, right? Because you just can't get it. Nobody's going to sell it to you, or it'd be astronomical to try and find. And I understand you get situations where you get battery corrosion wicking into this harness. You talked about coolant intrusion into your wicking through your harness. That is a definite place where you might have to say to the customer, okay, we're going to have to buy a harness for this. But like when this stuff, you're seeing it now when it's 8, 9 years old, even if you know what it is and want the harness, there's nobody that can sell you one. They don't make it. They don't.
Well, that was the thing too. I was learning with the aftermarket parts. I'm like, okay, this part broke and it's aftermarket, so that means I can't go down to the dealer and get it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I do? And my shop foreman would be like, dude, like, listen, man, like we can fix it, and if we can't fix it, let's find somebody that can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what do you mean we can? And this is, we can get the factory part. He's like, no, we can fix that. And I'm like, how? And there was always, and after a while, I started to kind of gain that creativity.
So give me an example
of
what kind of part you're talking about there. Like, you talking about like rebuilding the turbo housing, or are you talking about?
I'm trying to think of something super cool. Okay, yeah. So it's an S5 manual. I believe it's a V8. It comes with a 4.2 liter V8, and it's sweet. The only thing that sucks about those is they're slow.
Mm-hmm.
They are slow. They're big German V8s, all-wheel drive car. Won't get out of its own way. Guy is like, hey. And that's the thing about enthusiasts, especially you were talking about, fixing their cars and things like that. Once you fix their car, they are a customer for life, because they know there's no shop in this town that wants to touch their Jeep suspension, wants to touch their Honda, none of that. And so this guy was like, hey, listen, appreciate you guys fixing the S5. I want to put the supercharger in, tax title fee, cuts the check, no problem. Doesn't ask about the price, just what does it take, right? That's the customer you want. That is the qualified customer. So we put the supercharger in there. Everything's good to go. Actually, my foreman, he fabs up like a whole like coolant system for one of the coolant pumps for it. So that was neat. I got to see all that. It goes out the door. It's running for 8-9 months. Guy's just wailing on it, having a blast. And he comes in one day. He's like, yeah, I got low boost pressure. Oh, that's not good. Started looking everything over. Does a smoke test, and supercharger's leaking. Now this is a custom made. This is not something this. It's not even remotely. I wish I knew what core, and I wish I was that nerdy and detailed to it. But this is just not one that we could even send off to a rebuilder for it, because it's it's the outer housing that's made for this specific engine, and it's billet. I'm like, I don't know. Dang, that sucks, man. Hey, listen, the new one's like $8,000. He's like, whoa. He's like, pull it off. I'm looking at it. I'm like, and this guy straight up fabricates a new piece, then makes braces for the bottom of this thing so it won't break again.
Nice.
That's the sort of, cool stuff you get to. Yeah. And, you just don't think on the fly like that. I mean, I guess that's kind of an easier example, but there's all those little teeny tiny examples. You put a part on there, whether it be exhaust piece or clamp or whatever, and it doesn't fit right. You shave it down or what have you. You think on your feet, I'm all remove and replace, so that's the type of stuff you have to. I think that's one of the things that makes a good tech, is being able to think.
It was a big change for me when I got to the dealer and I started getting into working on all makes and all models and a different type of budget and whatnot. You learned a lot of the time that, I can put $1,000 piece of exhaust system on this, right? But it's an aftermarket piece that may only last 2 more years. Or I can go buy a flex pipe for $60 and I can take the piece out of the car. I can weld it back in, put it back in the car. It's going to last, because that's a stickler for me with exhaust, is because the OE stuff lasts so much longer, except for the few flanges that it has or the flex. So it's if I go and buy a Walker kit or someone else will put it on, I'm going to be changing that stuff out up here at least every 2 years. It's going to rot away, break off. It's going to be, and my customer's going to be very upset. So I'd rather.
And that's another thing that makes a good technician. And, if you're a Jeep dealer, you're not going to know that.
No.
You have the experience to know the different types of parts, and it seems cliche, okay, cool. No, what parts will fit that car and whatnot. When I was a dealer, I was like, well, if it says the manufacturer on the box, then it's good.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I got to see, I did get to see, they didn't do all just modified cars, but I got to see customers, that really loved their car, that had the funds had the funds, and the shop had built the trust for the customer to say, hey, listen, if it takes this, let's just do it. Mm-hmm. Let's just do it, because I know that other shops aren't going to have the skills and expertise. So, I mean, I enjoyed doing that stuff, but the thing for me specifically is I like the ins and outs of that. I really like the tech. Mm-hmm. I grew, hey, listen, man, I'm the generation, we had phones, we had all this cool stuff. We had computers. It was neat. Like that's me. So I like the data. I like the like, oh, this car's got 80 modules in it. That's neat. I'm all for it. So, I left there. I had an opportunity at the Audi dealer and I went there, and, it is a different experience because it's definitely a larger slash the same. The building size is about the same, but it's larger, and like how many cars we do. So things like having a porter, things like having, multiple, lube techs running, the shop. And
so sorry to cut you off. How many cars you guys are banging in and out a day? Like from what you told me, it's a larger operation, right?
So yeah, I mean, it's a larger. It's only 10 bays. Mm-hmm. But our shop is out 48 days on work, which is the highest in North Carolina. I don't know if that's a great brag. We work really hard to get work in and out, but here's the flip flop. We have warranty and recalls again. Mm-hmm. So that is the more solid and dependable work. Unfortunately, we've got a high failure component right now that's dropping out left and right. So, I mean, work there is a lot more busy. I didn't feel like my other dealer was that busy. I also felt like from 2020 to now, the ecosystem of becoming a technician is becoming a lot different. I don't know if my eye is just opening from perspective, but as far as technician pay and what the skills of a technician are in these days, is changing,
improving.
Yeah, improving. I think so. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, I'm an optimist. I really do love my job. I have bad days. Mm-hmm. I had a bad day today. I have had days where I made 4 hours. I've had days where I made more.
Yeah.
It's not all great. And I don't just do breaks all day. The cool part for me, and I guess this is my humble brag or what have you, but because I understand what people in the independent shop go through, I'm a little bit more humbled in what I do and in the skill that I do it in. So Audi does train you on oscilloscopes. That's the cool part. Mm-hmm. Volkswagen, I think, does, but I don't know how much it's used. I don't want to speak too much on that because I don't know. But we had one, but definitely no one used an oscilloscope in that shop.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used an oscilloscope in our shop like probably a month ago. I'm definitely no regular scope user, but I understand what it takes when I have an electrical issue now. What I need to do to properly diagnose it, and I'm not as dependent. And I still have to lean on my shop foreman. I'm very humbled because I'm kind of jumbled back in as soon as I get used to something, I'm kind of back into my my toes.
Yeah.
But listen, I enjoy Audi specifically and Euros because they are very complex and challenging. I'm not saying that the other cars aren't. Mm-hmm. But they do everything very specifically. There's no, if it's like this on this car, it's also like this on this car. They don't throw that a whole ideal away. The module's completely different. Like they had like ECMs just on European cars. ECMs are like on Volkswagens for the most part are the exact same part number on the case. Mm-hmm. Same part number. So you could go on eBay, you get your used ECM, no problem. The hardware and software are different.
Yep.
It's little teeny things like that. I can think of a million of them. I think we all kind of know, but I enjoy that. I enjoy all the tech, the ADAS, all this, craziness. And that's just something that's just fueled my passion. And then, working with, the younger guys. So we had like, at the other shops, we had maybe like 1 or 2 lube guys, but we didn't have like a whole lot of them. I've got like a little gaggle. They're not mine. They got, there's probably about 8 or 10 lube technicians, and they rotate in and out. I love all those guys. They call me shop dad. Call me shop dad. Cause I'm like, listen, I know you're frustrated with the advisor. It's going to be all right. So I've definitely become a little bit more mature, a little bit more humbled in like falling into that role. Right. I don't know if you've had anyone where you start to mentor them and kind of take them under your wing.
I've had in my career 1, 2. So actually a really good friend of mine has now been at the dealer that I left. I left there 2010. And he worked with me 3 years before he left. He is now still at that dealer that I left. We talk a lot. And I got him, he had come from a Toyota dealer down the street where he had only been a quick lube kid, and they were not going to put him into anything else. They wanted to keep him there, and he came to our Chrysler dealer down the street, and they threw him into the deep end on engine repairs. And I could still remember he would frustrate me some days because he came in, not a lot of tools. He was in hindsight, very smart with his money about how he spent it on tools. So he would be borrowing a lot, but he had the right kind of attitude, and he had the right kind of, I don't want to say like I was hard on him, but you could be like a shop dad to him and say, no, you didn't do this right. You screwed this up. And he didn't get all butthurt about it and run off and not talk to you. At the end of the day, you were still friends. You were still coworkers. He could still come to me. And to this day, like if he's got an off brand, or even sometimes still, he'll call me and be like, I got a Chrysler and it's doing this. And I'll be like, and I can't really give him the answer anymore because he's working on newer stuff than me. But it's just a different perspective of what would I do on that repair? How would I go about that diagnostic process? And we get to the end of it. But he is a fantastic engine tech now. He's kind of he's not a shop foreman role, but he's kind of somewhat of that now at the dealership. And then I have another young one, same thing. He came with me as a co-op student. So co-op up here was like he was in his final year of high school, and he would come and work at the shop 2 days a week, and then he would be in classroom back at the high school the other 3 days of the week, and he would work with me. He's now what we call up here a licensed tech. He's been a licensed tech 15 years. He's a Ford Master certified tech now. He got his master status at Chrysler. Absolutely brilliant tech. Fantastic. But he's a musician as well. So as great as he is as a mechanic, we'll talk sometimes, and he's like, he was in a country band, played drums. They had a couple hits here, did really well, went out on tour, everything else. And he's like, it's really hard to go back now as a mechanic when you've been on tour playing drums in a country band. So when it gets busy at tire season up here, he would go into the dealership and he would work a little bit, just mostly getting their tire rush down and helping them out. But he's like, if I could just keep making music for the rest of my life, he says, I would not be a mechanic. So I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of kids that mentored under me in the dealership role. I've had some fantastic mentors in my career, same as you.
Right.
Different perspectives. Like I have had guys at the dealer that were like absolutely phenomenal on diagnosing that brand. They knew it inside out. Like I can remember when the Neons were new. I saw the guy at my shop for him at the time. He was so fast on a Neon. I saw him put 4 pistons in a Neon because they were noisy. They used to rattle when they were cold. I'm not kidding you when I said he had those 4 pistons in and was putting the head back on in under an hour.
Wow.
Like he had done so many of them. I've never seen anything so fast as my life. And he wasn't just like a nuts and bolts guy. He could he was one of those, he knew the product inside and out. He knew all the wiring problems to look, how to read the wiring diagram. Like he didn't have to flip this fuse box cover over and look to know which fuse was which. It was all memorized. He'd worked on some of them. It was amazing to see.
Well, and that's, that's cool hearing it from you. It's just like you don't know sometimes how that, like the effect,
mm-hmm.
right? And we have people that make a really good effect on us, and we appreciate it, but we may never tell someone else. But it really has a lasting impression.